frosty and satisfying.
Frozen orange juice. Sounds like a brand of orange juice that somehow ties into that Disney movie about Elsa and her sister. But it's actually a freezer section staple that helped provide families with their vitamin C supply for decades. Or at least, it was. Which is why today we're going to follow the citrusy twists and turns that led to the death of frozen orange juice. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel. After that, please leave a comment and let us know what other frozen drinks you'd like to hear about. Okay, hope you're ready for some cold hard facts about some cold hard orange juice. Not everyone realizes it, but in addition to all the death, destruction, and quests for the Lost Ark, World War II was also a major driver of scientific and technological innovation. Inventions we owe to that particular conflict include superglue, the jet engine, synthetic rubber, radar, microwave ovens, duct tape, penicillin, and of course, frozen concentrated orange juice. What does orange juice have to do with beating Hitler? Well, after the United States entered the war in the early 1940s, the number of active duty soldiers ballooned from less than 500,000 before the war to over 12 million by 1945. That's a lot of mouths to feed. And along with that growth came a multitude of logistical nightmares, including how to deliver proper nutrition to all those soldiers on the ground, especially when it came to the essential vitamins typically found in fresh foods. Salads were hard to come by on the front, so to make up for the nutritional deficit, soldiers were given packets of lemon crystals, which provided them with vitamin C. Of course, there was a catch, that being that those crystals were, in a word, aggressively sour. Like involuntarily sucking your cheeks in until your face collapses into a black hole sour. Unsurprisingly, the troops hated the taste and gave the powder the nickname battery acid, which, as you've probably already guessed, was not intended as a compliment. It's even rumored some soldiers used the crystals to clean things instead of eating them. Hey, points for creativity. Enter the NRC, or National Research Company of Boston, who had come up with a clever vacuum process for dehydrating medical products for use in the war, presumably between innings while watching a Red Sox game. It probably wasn't all that hard for them, because vacuuming stuff was just kind of their thing, which we say because they also came up with a vacuum process for the separation of uranium used to build the atomic bomb for the Manhattan Project. Bet you didn't expect to see that on the resumes of the people who invented frozen orange juice. Anyway, at some point the Army inquired about using the vacuuming process on foods. And to get the ball rolling, they offered up a juicy government contract, $750,000 for 500,000 pounds of powdered orange juice. It was a tall order, but NRC was all about it. And to get the job done, they immediately created the Florida Foods Corporation. We have to imagine the Florida Foods Corporation folks were over the moon about the deal. But then they ran into a little snag. The war ended before the company could build its factory. It was good for world peace, but bad for the powdered juice business, so we'll call that a draw. Deprived of its purpose, Florida Foods shifted its strategy and decided to sell powdered OJ to the public. At least, that was the plan, until they came up with a tastier alternative. Frozen orange juice concentrate. Yes, we're now talking about that now iconic cylinder of slushy nostalgia. That frozen tube of orangey goodness that you thaw and mix with water to produce 48 ounces of tropical nutrition. Or you add vodka and party like it's your last night on Earth. Responsibly, of course. But in 1945, the Florida Foods Research Team, C.D. Atkins, Edwin Moore, and Louis McDowell, put their heads together, figuratively, and created a vacuum process for concentrating orange juice. And it was super effective, removing about 80% of the water from fresh oranges. Then they added a little bit of fresh juice to the final product to preserve the taste, and froze it into the cylinders of citrus snow we see today in freezer cases all over the world. And while OJ concentrate might not seem very impressive now, in the 1940s, the idea had quite an appeal. Come on, we had to say it at least once. And it's true. Back then, shelf-stable, preserved instant food was becoming all the rage. And frozen concentrated OJ made citrus refreshment available even where fresh oranges were hard to come by. Even if you lived in the Arizona desert, or the Alaskan tundra, or at the top of a very tall mountain somewhere. From sea to shining sea, you could have a glass of summertime anytime. It was truly groundbreaking. Florida Foods Corporation loved its new vacuum process so much that it briefly changed its name to Vacuum Foods, based not so subtly on their new production process. Sure, it was a little on the nose, but the company was gifted at removing water from things, not coming up with catchy names. We can't all be good at everything. And it didn't stick anyway. Later on, a savvy marketing firm coined the brand name Minute Maid to suggest the product was quick and easy to make. Even the executives at Vacuum Foods could tell that was a better name. And in 1949, they would formally adopt it as the name of the company. After that, the orange juice revolution was on like Donkey Kong. Excited for all those fresh-squeezed profits, Florida Foods Corporation head John M. Fox worked like a dog to promote the new product. In fact, he was so fired up about frozen orange juice that he personally knocked on doors all over his hometown of Hingham, Massachusetts, and handed out samples from the trunk of his car. Did that lead to an incredibly awkward moment where his high school ex-girlfriend stood on the sidewalk staring at him and wondering how he wound up selling trunk juice in life? We'd like to think so. But the point is, pounding the pavement paid off. The instant OJ caught on. And before long, supermarkets were selling out of the frozen wonders, which were going for a cool 29 cents a pop. After that, the frozen orange juice biz grew fast. At least 50,000 gallons were produced in 1945, ballooning to 1.9 million gallons by 1948, and it only got bigger from there. Naturally, that wasn't all because of Fox hoofing it around his hometown. He actually had a little help from the same blue-eyed crooner who brought us the perennial hit song, White Christmas. Yes, that's right. In 1948, Florida Foods hired the legendary Bing Crosby to do a 5-day-a-week radio show promoting Minute Maid, and they could hardly ask for a better spokesperson.
Yes, Minute Maid orange juice is better for your health.
By that point in his career, Crosby was like the Taylor Swift of the 1940s. He had already sold 100 million records, making him the biggest music star in the world, and polls of Americans declared him the most admired man alive, beating out heavy hitters like Jackie Robinson and the Pope. Of course, that kind of celebrity doesn't come cheap, and while Vacuum Foods was plenty rich in oranges, it didn't have the cash to fully compensate the Bingster for his endorsement. So instead, the company created a marketing subsidiary with Crosby listed as a manager and paid him in Minute Maid stock, which turned out to be a hell of a lot more lucrative than cash. The singer received 20,000 shares originally valued at 10 cents each, which equaled $200,000, but the stock only shot up from there. Long story short, that $200,000 only scratched the surface of the money he would make over the course of the whole campaign. Talk about orange crushing the market. Anyway, the publicity worked. Sales skyrocketed, blasting from under $3 million to almost $30 million within just 3 short years. The radio show only ran until 1950, but for the next 3 decades, Crosby appeared in radio spots and television commercials for Minute Maid, and thanks to his star power, frozen Minute Maid became a massive success. Everything was coming up oranges. And over the decades, Minute Maid's frozen tubes of icy citrus became iconic parts of every supermarket freezer aisle and breakfast table, not to mention a key ingredient in various spiked social refreshments, also known as Hunch Punch, Sonic Brew, Jungle Juice, Five Finger Kiss, or Giggle Water. Yes, frozen concentrated orange juice was everywhere, and it didn't stop with beverages. People mixed it in their marinades, drizzled it on dressings, and baked it into breads. They mixed it with whipped cream and Jell-O to make creamsicle pie. And if all that isn't enough, concentrated OJ was also used to make another nostalgic darling, the Orange Julius. Minute Maid was getting so big, in fact, it caught the attention of another beverage juggernaut, the Coca-Cola Company. Yes, the Atlanta-based beverage giant was looking to expand its own horizons beyond soda, and to that end, in 1960, they bought Minute Maid, but not with cash, with a stock swap. Hey, if it was good enough for Bing, it was good enough for Minute Maid, right? And so, with the sheer marketing muscle of the Coca-Cola Company behind it, frozen concentrated OJ became king of the American breakfast table for decades. Consumers' thirst for frozen orange juice was unquenchable, so keeping up with demand required a rather impressive production process. The mechanical extractors used to obtain juice could process 400 to 700 oranges per minute, with some factories processing more than 100,000 boxes of oranges per day. That's 517,000 gallons of juice, which is a year's supply for 17,000 people, all in one day. Naturally, those ridiculously high volumes required a ridiculously large workforce to harvest the oranges, and that's where things started going off the rails. In the 1970s, Minute Maid became embroiled in a scandal about the working conditions of its farm laborers, which were not great. Also at issue was the poor housing those workers had to live in, which was referred to as slave quarters. Yikes. Luckily for those workers, NBC covered their plight in a 1970 documentary called Chet Huntley's Migrant, an NBC white paper. The show exposed Minute Maid's unfair labor practices, shocked audiences, and created a public backlash. Rightly so, the expose put a freeze on Minute Maid's sweet reputation, and the United Farm Workers stepped in on behalf of the mistreated laborers. In response, Minute Maid established a program to improve conditions.
Upgrading wages, fringe benefits.
But that scandal wasn't the only problem for frozen OJ. There was also the effect of changing consumer tastes. In the 1970s and 80s, there was growing public interest in fresh foods and better nutrition. Removing water from orange juice can diminish its flavor, and to compensate, juice companies often add sweeteners, additives, and sodium. Many brands have a fairly high sugar content, making the breakfast staple somewhat less healthy than many believed. To compensate, both Minute Maid and their competitor brands started creating light and sugar-free varieties. It was a step in the right direction, but a lot of the health-related problems went unaddressed. For example, there's evidence that frozen concentrated OJ contains less nutrients than fresh squeezed, especially when it comes to iron, potassium, and fiber. That being said, removing the water before shipping reduces the chance of harmful bacteria building up, which is good for consumers' health. And the concentrated product is pound for pound lighter to ship and stock, using less fuel and cargo space when transported to retail stores, which is good for the environment. So there are pros and cons. In spite of its decades of success, over the years, frozen concentrated orange juice lost its luster with the public. Consumer tastes shifted. People started losing their appetite for processed foods, and the nostalgic citrus block suddenly seemed, well, obsolete. So, after roughly 80 years of production, in January of 2026, Coca-Cola announced it was discontinuing the Minute Maid frozen juice line in the US and Canada. According to Coke, "We are discontinuing our frozen products and exiting the frozen can category in response to shifting consumer preferences. We're focusing on products that better match what our consumers want." Makes sense. Best of all, Coke's announcement about the end of what became a genuine piece of Americana was received by the internet with a level-headed and peaceful resolve.
Did you see the memo about this? Yeah.
Everybody just accepted the inevitable, rolled with the change, and went on with their lives with no comment at all. Nah, obviously, we're just kidding. People had hella feelings about the news, and social media was aflame with posts lamenting the end of an era.
I'm not crying, okay?
Mourning a piece of nostalgia from their collective childhood and just generally being grumpy about the whole thing. Boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials alike joined together and affectionately recalled the schloop sound of the frozen bricks sliding out of the cylindrical can and into the plastic Tupperware pitcher as they stirred the water in with a wooden spoon. Some fondly remembered eating the intense orange concentrate straight, claiming the brain freeze was worth it. Some longed for their college years, when they mixed concentrate with the cheapest alcohol they could afford and slept it off in the front yard. But all is not lost. Minute Maid may have been the originator, and it may have been the most famous brand name, but it's been a long time since they were the only game in town. So if you want to transport yourself back to your childhood, you can still get frozen orange concentrate at a grocery store under any number of generic in-store labels. And Tropicana, which is partially owned by PepsiCo, as fate would have it, also still makes the nostalgic cans of pulp. So there are options, or at least there are for now. So what do you think? And were you a fan of Minute Maid's frozen orange juice? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from Weird History Food.